Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Promised Neverland manga review. This one's going to be for chapter 180, which is called Your Everything. Now, as far as I'm aware, information seems to have come out suggesting pretty heavily that this is the second last chapter of The Promised Neverland, and that we are ending next week with one final chapter, chapter 181, which is going to be about 27 pages long, and that will finish up the series. As far as I'm aware, this is correct. I saw one, I think, scan of it from the actual, I suppose, Japanese Shonen Jump, and a lot of people are reporting on it. But again, this chapter has just been released. I don't know exactly if it's 100% confirmed, so I'm going to be viewing this as if it is true. This is the second last chapter. But anyway, let's get into it. Chapter 180. I actually really like this chapter. I think it solved the problem that, of course, people had of, are we okay with the fact that they basically seem to quite heavily suggest in the previous chapters that there is no reward, that the reward, they just sort of explain away. It's fine. Emma, do we trust what Emma is saying here about what the reward is or is not? And ultimately, this chapter reveals that she did, in fact, lie about it. There was a reward. Most of what she said that the one said is true, but the last bit she lied about, and that she has actually made a sacrifice to allow the others to live in happiness while something bad happens to her. And I think the way it goes with the idea of her losing her memories is actually pretty interesting. Again, with only one chapter left, it's tricky to know exactly what way they're going to do. I'll do some speculation at the end of the video about what I think they will or won't do in the final chapter. But I actually liked this chapter in terms of, I suppose, showing the consequences for Emma and what her making that decision has done to her. It's an interesting one to do, the whole taking away her memories, that she's safe. She's in the same world as them, but is not connected to them anymore because she won't remember them. Even if she sees them, she won't remember them. And what do you do? Which I think made the last page of this chapter so impactful of oh no, how are they going to do this? Them finding her after all this time, only to find out that her memories are gone. How do they resolve this? Is it as simple as, does she just get her memories back? Or will this be the ultimate consequence of her making that choice with the one? That even reuniting with everyone, she won't remember. And they're going to have to deal with this new Emma, whatever new name she's calling herself. That's the character that they now have. That's kind of interesting, but it's The Promised Neverland. You sort of are... We have to expect some sort of a twist in some way. Just something different, new, to add an extra angle onto this. But we'll see what happens. So let's go through this. So we open up with a sort of recap of what the reward was, basically. But we're going to get the full thing this time. The reward that I want is your family. Your family is most important to you, so I want your family. Does that mean you want to kill and eat my family? No, I can't kill you or your family, and I don't intend to. Don't worry, all of the children can live and go to the human world. And Emma's like, then what? And he says, but you'll say goodbye to your family. And this is when we cut back to where we ended the last chapter, with Emma on the ground in the snow and the guy walking up to her. And so it's revealed that he's wearing a gas mask, and he's like, a child? What's a human being doing here? And it's revealed that he lives in this pretty nice kind of wooden cabin out in the middle of this kind of, snowy landscape, trees, mountains. It's actually a pretty nice looking place, but it is sort of isolated. So she is sort of out in the middle of nowhere. They don't give us an exact location, but they get across that it is separate from everywhere, but that you can get to other places. So I don't think it's like the South Pole. I think it is just a place that happens to have a pretty big, icy, kind of snowy, kind of tundra area to it. So he brings her inside. The fire is on. She kind of wakes up, and he's like, where'd you come from? Why were you out there? And she's just getting her bearings. She's looking at him, and she's like, I don't know. And like, it's just kind of revealed to her of like, she's trying to think of like, surely I have a reason for why I was out there. And then she realizes that I actually just don't know. Why was I there? Where did I come from? You know, I can't remember anything. And this is where they fill us in on the end of what the One said. It wasn't what Emma said, which was that the One said that because you suffered for 1,000 years, that was enough entertainment for me. That's not what he said. He instead says, your past memories and future connections, everything, I'll take your family from your world. That's the reward. I'll grant your wish, but in return, you'll never see your family again. So there it is. That's what he wants. He is going to take something from Emma specifically. And after initially being sort of shocked at this, she sort of puts on a bit of a smile. It's kind of like a sad smile, but she's kind of happy that it is not something that will affect the others. This is something she can do herself. And so she says okay, as we get basically a look into what could have been if he didn't ask for any reward. If it went the way Emma said it went in the previous chapters, this is what it would have looked like. It would have been Emma with Phil, with Norman, with everyone, all wearing normal clothes, not just all the same clothes, living together in the human world, pure happy ending. That's what it could have been. But it's not. Because she makes the decision, it's going to be everyone else except her with this happy ending. So I like them showing the sort of, you know, this is what you expected it to be, but it's not that. And this is what we have to deal with, of like, what is Emma's experience? While everyone else is together looking for her, what is she doing? So back in the house, we look at the walls and we see pictures on the man's wall, and we see that he had a family. And, you know, we show a shot of like the church, I guess, and stuff like that. So the question is, where are these characters? What has happened? Why does he have to wear a mask outside and so on? We know there was a war in the world, and we'll get some information on that in a second. So he's like, well, what's your name? And she says, I don't know. So that's kind of interesting. She just doesn't know her name at all. She has like complete like amnesia about this whole thing. Where did you come from? Doesn't know. Your parents? Don't know. What were you doing out there without a mask and wearing such light clothing? Again, no answer. She's like, I'm sorry that I can't answer your questions. And he just says, no need to apologize. But he does question what exactly is happening here, because he looks at the stuff that she has with her. Like, you know, the pen, there's a picture of like, it's just her on the picture and so on. And she's like, she has a rifle. What's that about? And he's just like, well, you're not hurt. I'm glad you're okay. There are no villages nearby, and we don't have signal up here. I can't call for help until spring. This is showing how sort of isolated he is, of like, they're going to be stuck here for the winter months. So this is what we get here. I can offer you food and a place to sleep. You might remember eventually. Don't rush. Just rest. And she says, thank you. As we cut through the next month, basically, November 15th, November 19th, November 25th, December 3rd, December 8th, and we just see the same thing happening over and over again. Emma and the man just sitting down to have, I suppose, tea or coffee together, and just nothing changing. Her not remembering anything, and there not seeming to be any particular connection developing between the two either. Not that there's any animosity, it's just that neither of them have opened up to each other yet, I guess. So he asks, have you regained any of your memories? No, sorry. And we see her looking at the sort of coveted dollar, necklace, of course, that reminds her of Mujika. So we then cut to her asleep, and in her dreams, she remembers people calling out to her. So we have Mujika with her face obscured, saying, Emma, someone is calling my name. Isabella, face obscured, Emma. Hugo, Emma. All the other kids calling her Emma. And of course, Norman and Ray, Emma. And she's like, who are all of you? Who's Emma? But this feels so warm. Perhaps this is heaven. How nice. And she reaches out for them, but they disappear. And she wakes up. And as she explains in just a little bit, she forgets pretty much everything once she wakes up, apart from just the sort of the emotion of what she went through. She remembers none of the specifics, just this sense of longing, basically, is all that she remembers. So she goes downstairs, she sees that the man is outside, she follows him, and she follows him to, I suppose, you know, a graveyard, effectively. The rubble of a building and some kind of grave markers. They're my family. And we again show the pictures on the wall, the people who are gone now. My family, my friends, my home. I've lost them all in a stupid war. I alone was left behind alive. That must hurt. Yes, it does. But although they're dead, they're still family, and this buried village is still my home. As long as I stay here and remember them, I can be with my family and friends. I wish I could search for your family too. If they're alive, you'd want to see them, yes? So it's this interesting dynamic of like Emma, who through sort of magical means has forgotten everything, and then this man who has actually lost everyone, always wanting to remember this, not wanting to forget. Yet Emma has forgotten but wishes she could remember, because you know there's still hope that the people she cares about are still out there. It's an interesting contrast of like they're sort of opposites in a way. And Emma's like, I don't know, since I don't remember anything. Even though I try, the inside of my head is like this snow, pure white and blank. But when I look at this necklace, I feel something. The morning after I have that dream, I feel sadness. Even though I don't remember anything, even though I don't know the people, even though I forget them once I wake up, I feel warmth. I long for them. So that's all that she remembers. And without understanding why, it makes me cry. And we see Emma break down in tears on her knees. The man sort of comforts her, puts a hand on her back. It's a pretty nice shot as I suppose the sun comes up over the sort of graveyard cemetery type area, and we cut then to a new scene. So she says, somehow I know clearly that I won't regain my memories or who I was before, but I'm starting to think that's okay. With my new name, my new self, I'll live today and seek out tomorrow. I've stopped having those dreams too. And we see that she and the man have taken a trip out to an actual town on the train, and they're going shopping here. So this is Emma's first time getting to see a big human city, so she's like, oh, so many houses, so many people, she's in the middle of it. It's a great experience for her. She's having the experience the other kids have upon entering the human world in like the last chapter. And he says, don't get lost, we're going home as soon as we finish shopping, or there'll be no more trains to take back. And she says okay, and runs off in one direction, and we see that she's up on a sort of like kind of elevated area, sort of walkway, and on the ground, I suppose, below, near some stalls, we see it's Ray, Gilda, and I think Phil. I guess a few months have passed, he's maybe grown his hair out. I think it's meant to be Phil, slightly older Phil. They're there. And on the last two panels, we see Emma just runs by, and it seems like Ray, Gilda, and Phil notice her, and they're, I suppose, going to go after her. So it's just this tease of she's forgotten them, and over time, she's learned to just accept that her memories probably won't come back. She probably will never remember who she was before, and she'll be okay. She'll just live her new life with her new name, being the same Emma that we know, just starting again. And she's even stopped having the dreams about the other people, and has learned to accept what she has, I suppose. But here is the tease of those memories are sort of, I suppose, going to be attempted to be touched on in the next chapter, I guess, the last chapter, as far as we're aware. It's a really interesting one, because when I first finished the chapter, it was before I knew the information about this potentially being the second last chapter. So I was more thinking about, like, that's a really cool plot point that could take place over like 5-10 chapters of just how do we deal with Emma's lost memories, and like how the other kids go about, you know, trying to get them back in some way. Like, what is the arc that they go about here? But now we know there's only one chapter left. Admittedly, it's like a 1.5 times the length chapter, but still, just one more week left of The Promised Neverland. What are they going to do here? So this is where it comes into speculation. Are they going to do the obvious thing of they catch up to her, they call her Emma, she even though she stopped having the dreams and has maybe forgotten about what happened, she does, something hits, seeing these people, these blank faces, but they're kind of familiar to her, calling that name. Does that awaken her memories? Is that enough just to have people saying they know her? Or will they go down the path of like, no, like as they say in this chapter, the one says even like future connections, that to me the chapter tries to get across the idea very heavily with second last page, as well as what the one says about, you know, past memories and future connections. She won't get her memories back. If they commit to that, I think it is quite an interesting idea of the others having to accept that, you know, do they want, like the others just having to accept that they're not going to be able to get Emma back. Whatever her new name is, that is the character that they're dealing with now. And do they just start again with her and get involved in her life, or what? Like, what decision do they make about this? Of like, just accept that it's almost like having a new person in their life, and that the Emma they knew is kind of gone, even though this new person is the person that they know still. It still seems like that optimistic, adventurous Emma, just reset without the memories. So it's going to be such an interesting dynamic of seeing them interact with her, which I assume will happen, and them not getting the response that they want. Just that sort of sadness of like, oh, them realizing that memories is what was taken. So yeah, what do they do? Do they commit to there being consequences for the new promise, or giving us the fully happy ending? Because I think there's value to both camps here, of you wanting there to be proper consequences for what happens, so it's not just everything's worked out perfectly, but you also want there to be that happy ending, because the series has been about being sort of idealistic and it being able to work. That's been sort of Emma's character arc this sort of whole time in a way. And then the other thing is just like, sort of, what is the sort of imagery that they sort of end on? I think most people have probably had it in their minds that the imagery they end on is the whole group together living in some sort of a house. And do they just do basically this guy's house, but now all the kids live there? He has lost everyone close to him and is lonely, has enjoyed having Emma around. What if his house was now the home for all of the Gracefield kids? Now, that would be some way to end it that sort of bookmarks the series of like, we started with them all living in one house, we end with them all living in one house, but a few things have changed. Is that enough? Is that enough to do that and potentially not mention the demon world in the last chapter? Not cover other stuff that's going on here? The only other things I noticed, of course, would be that the selection of the characters that they have who spot Emma. It's Ray, Gilda, and I think Phil. So, no Norman. Now, the thing with Norman, of course, is he's a lambda, so he has this sort of sickness, you know, he's sort of destined to die. But they had already set up chapters and chapters ago that Adam's blood is sort of the key to fixing the lambdas. And a few months, I guess, have passed, so has Norman been healed, or what? There's obviously, I suppose, some speculation and some validity to the idea of like, what if Norman has died in the intervening times? That would be something very tragic, of like them having to sort of reveal to her that Norman is gone, but she doesn't remember him, so it's just like tragedy of like forgetting him and not having the emotions about him not being there. But I don't think they'll do that, so they have to explain that if the lambdas are okay. But it is notable that they decided to not have Norman be here. I'm guessing it's the idea of the groups have split up. This is just Ray's small group of 3 who have come to this specific area to search for Emma, and Norman is probably leading some of the other characters elsewhere to search for her. That's realistically why they split it up this way. Why would you put sort of like 2 of your best together when it's better to split it out a little bit more? Yeah, beyond that, it's very tricky. Like with the guy here, like we don't even get his name. Like is there a significance to necessarily like who he is? I almost feel like will they reveal his name and it's going to be something sort of significant of like, is it going to be like a Ratri clan member but like some deep connection to it? I'm not sure. I assume that's the tricky thing of like, isn't enough to just be like they all live in this guy's house and one chapter of setup for like he's lost everything but now he's going to sort of gain a new family? Like, is that enough? I'm not sure. So will there be a reveal with him? Like I said, Demon World, did they touch on it like at all? It's very tricky about what they choose to focus on with only potentially 27 pages. I think there's potential. Like I don't think this is just going to be a terrible ending, like they've rushed it and stuff like that. I think they can bring this to an end nicely, but they have a real challenge, I think, on their hands of the people who want the happy ending versus the people who want the consequences to be real. And I personally don't know which way I would want it to be, because I suppose because there's only been a few chapters since, you know, Emma was sort of happy with the rest of everyone, that just restoring her memories and it's happy again isn't enough. Because does it hit home if with only one chapter of setup for like Emma's lost her memories, Emma gets them back? I almost think they have to fully commit to this memory thing is real. She's not going to get those memories back, and that has to be it. I think that's probably the way they have to do it, because I think it might be too easy just to the memories, you know, are the memories come back just by meeting the others. But yeah, I think that's most of what I want to talk about in this review. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this potentially second last chapter of The Promised Neverland. How do you think they are going to wrap this one up in just one more chapter? And I suppose just your general thoughts on what's happening here. Suddenly finding out that it's coming to an end so quickly. Let me know your thoughts. But that has been the review. Thanks for watching, and bye.